Good morning and welcome to the Leeds City Council Scrutiny Board for Environment, Housing and Communities. My name's Stuart Galton. I am the chair of the meeting and we will now introduce the other members of the Scrutiny Board, starting with Councillor Dowson.
Good morning everyone, Councillor Dowson, Chapel Allerton Ward.
Councillor Kate Haig, Labour, Farnley and Wortley.
Good morning, folks. It's Councillor Adrian McCluskey, Farnley and Wortley Ward.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Karen Renshaw from Marsley and Robin Hood.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Abdul Hanan for Headingley and High Park.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Shafali from Beeston Holbeck Ward.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Annie Maloney, also from Beeston Holbeck Ward.
Good morning, Councillor John Tudor from Killingbeck and Seacroft Ward, substituting for Councillor Luke Farley.
Morning, Lou Cunningham, Armley Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlin Wharfdale Ward.
Thank you very much. Those are our board members, and we also have council oversight of us from professional officers. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, Rebecca Atherton, Principal Scrutiny Advisor.
Thank you very much. Just for the benefit of those people who might be watching on the webcast, please be aware that it is being webcast and that you will need to use the information in front of you in terms of being able to speak. And it is normally customary that if you do wish to speak that you make me aware and I will give my assent as the chair, just to make sure that the business is conducted effectively. Right, thank you very much. I'll now move through to the formal items of the agenda. Item 1.
There are no appeals today, Chair.
Item 2.
There are no items excluded from the public domain.
Item 3.
No late items.
Woo. Item 4. Are there any declarations of interest?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare my pecuniary interest as a drug and alcohol liaison nurse with the Forward Leeds Hospital in Reach team.
Thank you. No further declarations. Item 5, apologies.
We have 2 apologies today. We've got Luke Farley, Councillor Luke Farley, and Councillor Tudor is substituting. We've also had apologies from Councillor Norma Harrington.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 6, which is minutes. Do we have any comments on the minutes or any matters arising from them, from members of the board? Okay. The only thing I will mention is it was raised an issue around food safety at the board which wasn't able to be answered at the meeting itself, but that has now been responded to and we should have access to that. So we'll move on to the items for today's business. And we'll start at item 7, which is our work programme for the year ahead. Do we have any comments on the amended work programme from the last meeting? Very good. I will point out that we do have the potential for a further item on the work programme because we have been discussing with the head of equalities that we will be taking a deeper dive into an area of interest which is highlighted by them that they feel that the Scrutiny Board will be able to help in taking that issue forward. So we'll look back to reporting on that at the next meeting. Okay, so we'll move on now to item 8, which is the first substantive item of business, and it is the Antisocial Behaviour Strategy, which is coming to us for pre-decision scrutiny, we're always very grateful to get an early insight into policy. So thank you very much for that. Now, for the benefit of board members, we have a lot of faces that aren't quite so familiar to us because a lot of them are outside of the council organisation. So I'll just go through the list of attendees here to make sure that they're all correct, or if we do have somebody who is replacing others. So we have, of course, Councillor Mary Harland, who is a familiar face to our scrutiny board and always welcome. Claire Smith, who is, no, she's not here. Mark Charlton. We have got Mark Charlton. He's the head of community safeguarding. Jude Roberts. We do have Jude, who is manager of safeguarding. Superintendent Matt Scott is not here. But we do have Chief Superintendent Jonathan McNiff. No? Chief Inspector. Oh, Chief Inspector. Did we give you a promotion, or was it? Most welcome. Oh, okay. That will be corrected in the paperwork, I can assure you. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Councillor Harland to introduce the item before we ask questions.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, this is the report outlines the revised ASB strategy for 2025 to 28 and has been designed to contribute to the wider aims of the Best City ambition. It focuses on working with and for communities, families and individuals, and also on an earlier intervention approach. The strategy is also aligned with the West Yorkshire Mayor's Crime and Policing Plan and contributes to the delivery of Leeds Community Safety Strategy. It's been developed in consultation with key partners within Safer Leeds Community Safety Partnership, including West Yorkshire Police, West Yorkshire Fire and Rescue, and the voluntary and community sector. Of course, feedback from local communities has been also instrumental in shaping this strategy as it picks up on what is actually happening in our communities. And I believe Heather is here, Heather Ashby, in place of Claire, with support from Matt Charlton.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to offer further insight at this stage, or would you just like to welcome questions? Over to questions then. Right. Councillor Haigh.
Thank you. And obviously, as members, this is a very important part of what the council does in our work, because many of us deal with ASP-related casework on a regular basis. And I've got two things I'd like to explore. The first is when we have ASB occurring, but also associated criminality, it can be sometimes, I think, for us difficult to see the path, because I think ASB tends to step back while criminal proceedings are taking place, and that can often make residents feel very vulnerable because they feel that issues which eventually you can see are going to play out as maybe being housing related or whatever, are put to one side while that criminal behaviour is being dealt with. And is there something in this strategy which can help us and residents see a path through that? And I think I'd like to deal with that first, because my second point is unrelated to that. Thank you.
Heather?
Thank you, Chair. I think that we need to understand that if any criminal proceedings are being investigated, they need to take precedence. We can't interfere with those proceedings and that investigation. However, what we do strive always to do is tackle antisocial behaviour separately to that. There are always measures that we can put in place in order to have members of the community feel safe in their home and the place that they live. And it is always our key drive to protect those individuals. And like I say, dealing with criminal proceedings does have to take precedence, and the strategy does follow that. We are very victim focused, and we will support victims of antisocial behaviour and criminality, and we will work with our partners in order to have a collaborative approach to tackling antisocial behaviour and criminality.
Can I just jump in
Good morning. It might help for as well if I talk from a police perspective. Obviously, this is one of the benefits of us developing the triage system that they have done within LASBAT, is that actually we can look holistically, see what the issues are, and then who's best placed to be able to deal with them. You're right, traditionally there has been a sense that some of the ASB intervention would have taken a back seat whilst the criminal investigation takes primacy. What I've always sought to do, though, is to make sure that the two are running collaboratively together, so that victims aren't then shortchanged, because we know with the lead times through investigations and getting people, offenders to court, it can actually be many months, if not a year, and we can't tolerate local communities having to suffer that ASB through that long period. So yeah, we do work very, very closely to try and minimise any lag or delays caused by the investigation of criminal offences.
Councillor Haig?
I think, and I am thinking of a particular case, but I've seen it in other cases as well. I think the issue is, whilst criminal cases must be investigated and properly done so, I think that where other action, as for example, moving people, taking tenancy-related action, those are, they don't require the same test in law. We have powers, and waiting to use them, which is what is happening, does mean that residents feel vulnerable, and however much we can say, you know, there's an injunction or there's a bail condition or there's you know, you can call 999, I'm not sure that any of us would feel particularly comfortable if we felt we were not safe.
I completely agree. You're right. Public safety and feeling safe is a real, it's a key facet of what we do. And I think the premises, the partial premises closures is a good example of the legislation that we use, whereby that can be instigated and often is by police. The senior person that's actually dealing with that incident can then instigate that, and then our counterparts within, say, for Leeds, are able to step in very, very quickly afterwards and take it to court and then progress it. So that is just one element of legislation where we work really, really closely together to make sure that we're getting the right result and that people do feel safe in their homes.
If looking at page, it's either 8 or 52, depending on what you're looking at, of the report, it refers to the ASB Crime Policing Act of 2014, which introduced the what was known as the community trigger, now is the ASC/hate case review. But this is the only reference in this report to that. So what is our trigger locally? Because obviously it should be no more than 3 reports to any agency. So how many reports is it? And are victims informed of their rights under the trigger? And has it been used at all? And what is our strategy for dealing with it?
Thank you. Yes, the ASB review trigger is used. It's used regularly. On the data mill, if you have a look on there, it will show you our figures about how many ASB reviews are requested and how many we undertake at the time. Our ASB review process is up to 3. That is some work that we're ongoing with at the moment with the help of ASB Help. Our service are commissioning them to come in and do some work to ensure that we are best practice on ASB case reviews and hate reviews. But it is something that is available. Our customers know it's on all our information that gets sent out to them. It's on all the terms and all the letters and also on our emails. So our customers are very well informed about the ASB case reviews. But I can send you the links after this meeting for the ASB data mill so that you can see the figures.
I just think, Chair, it would have been really helpful to have a bit more detail in the strategy, including perhaps some of that data. Then we could have looked at it before the meeting.
Is there any way of sharing that data subsequent to the meeting so that we can have a look at it? Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Heather. Councillor Anderson.
At the moment, we get an excellent service from the ASB. But one of the areas that I've been pushing your predecessors on was registered social landlords and getting them to volunteer to come under your auspices. Where are we now with that? Because it's still a big, big problem, particularly when you've got new housing estates with these housing suppliers on them, and you've got argument, shall we say, between people who have purchased houses and people who are renting them. Where are we with that? I can't see anything explicit in here. It talks very clearly about the Housing Act, which fine, we've got a brilliant service for our tenants, but what have we got, and where are you with the discussions with the RSLs?
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. We're always working with our RSLs to get them on board and to understand where we are with regards to antisocial behaviour. Antisocial behaviour is also important to deal with within our communities and those tenancies. We assist our RSLs in being able to have training to help with their the way that they deal with antisocial behaviour. It is very important to us that they do come on board with us, and there is part of the housing legislation that now is a requirement. So myself and a senior member of housing have just recently written to some of our local RSLs for them to come on board with us. So hopefully we'll have a return in that. We also asked them to come and join our antisocial behaviour board, and yet we have to wait for somebody to come and take us up on that offer at this time, but we are reaching out to them.
Thanks for that. Can I just... So, what can I do? Well, you and I know, because you and I have worked on one recently. How do we go about, as councillors, interacting and getting some action? Because it's falling between ASB, the relevant social landlord not doing things, and the police. Nobody seems to be responsible for it. So where do we go for help and support? I know I can come to you before you say that, but that's because you and I know each other. That's the only reason.
I think that is the way that we go for it. As you're aware, I'm new into this role of service delivery manager, but I've worked in Lasbert for 17 years. I think that it would be important to use your relationships and ours to build those bridges, and to have those RSLs come on board again with especially with their maybe requirement for training and to understand their legislation. As you're aware, you know, there may be some new antisocial behaviour strategies that need to go through, which will give RSLs the ability to do their own premises closure orders. That's something that they've not done before, and we always take the lead with them in that work. So I would look to all of you to support us in building those relationships with the RSLs.
Thank you. Councillor Dowson. I beg your pardon. Mandy, did you want to come in there? Sorry, we didn't introduce Mandy Sawyer at the beginning.
Sorry, I snuck in a little bit late. So, Mandy Sawyer from Housing Leeds. I think an important point to stress is that the housing associations are regulated by the Regulator of Social Housing, and there are very clear expectations set on landlords around managing antisocial behaviour. But not only that, around working with their local authority to ensure that community safety and antisocial behaviour issues are addressed. I think, as Heather said, we've approached the housing associations and set out that ask, but certainly we can set out that clearer expectation. But I think alongside that, it's that offer of support of how we can support them to do that more effectively. So I think we're at the start of that journey of strengthening those relationships. And some of those housing associations are very well engaged with us already, but there's work to do with some of the others. Thank you.
Councillor Dowson.
I thought Councillor Haig's point was really good about people feeling vulnerable and not feeling safe. I'm sure as councillors we all have casework where people won't go to the authorities because they're just too frightened to do so, and that's where it's our job as a trusted person to actually often take these cases on board and try and deal with it without the evidence, without all the things that you need to do your jobs effectively. So I'm just asking you what it feels like from your side, how the work is going cross discipline. So, you know, how's the interaction with the noise team, parking services, youth services, highways? We've talked about housing. How are those relationships? But also, do you feel that you have all the tools you need to be able to take the work that you do forward? The police in particular are always banging on about we arrest them, they go to court and then get off. Is there anything we can do that actually will make evidence gathering easier, will make people feel that they can come forward without the fear of reprisal and repercussions on them? So that goes down to early intervention as well. How are we picking up cases potentially before they actually get to residents complaining, because we've got housing officers, we've got people from highways on the street. Just how are those relationships working?
I would say that we have a very strong partnership approach. We, in specific areas, I can refer to a problem-solving approach where all our partners come together, specifically in South Leeds, where we have environmental services, localities teams, West Yorkshire Police, Housing Leeds. We all come together to problem-solve in those locality areas. It's always our idealistic that we get in there with that early intervention, prevention, education, diversionary activities. That's where we look before we go down any enforcement route. I think that all our relationships are strong. I think there are some that could be a little stronger, and that is something that we're working on collaboratively, especially in our parks and our green spaces, to ensure that we're dealing with those effectively. But I would say that we have one of the strongest, if not the strongest, partnership approach in the country with regards to antisocial behaviour, and it's because of how our structure is and how aligned we are with each other that we can problem solve and manage. We've obviously have 6 weekly tasking meetings, we have those community hubs. We are going more out into our communities and the public in order to up that reporting mechanism. So you'll find a lot of our staff in community hubs more regularly in order that they can have that face-to-face interaction without doing any reporting over the phone or online, so that we are a visual representation on the street. And that is really important for us. And again, we do that collaboratively with our partners to get out there and reach as many properties as we possibly can. We had ASB Awareness Week as well the other week, which we did an awful lot of work out there. And that doesn't just stop at ASB Awareness Week. It's something that we continue to do week in, week out.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment just from a policing perspective. You're absolutely right, Councillor. Any case that we take to court, it's always preferable to have that first person account and the evidence there. That's really, really impactful and can help us in terms of our prosecutions. But as you'll perhaps be aware, we've got a lot of investment from the police perspective in Lasbat. We've got reach into all 3 localities, as well as our specialist Leodis team that work in conjunction with Lasbat to problem solve specific areas. Where residents don't feel able to give evidence directly, then what we'll seek to do there is to take that what would otherwise be termed as being technically hearsay evidence, i.e. a third person that can actually stand up there and give that evidence on their behalf or collaboratively with other residents, so that their voice doesn't get lost and the prosecution fail for the natural and understandable concerns and reticence that someone might have to give evidence in their own account.
Councillor McCluskey.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, in relation to the Leeds Watch cameras, how effective are they in managing antisocial behaviour, and what use do they do? Because I don't seem to get any use out of the cameras.
I think that we're very much reliant on the cameras from Leeds Watch. I think that the footage that we get from those cameras is prevalent to resolving antisocial behaviour, but also criminality. I think that some of the things that the officers see, watch and can direct, especially our police colleagues, to is a real benefit to the city, and there are some crimes that have been resolved without that CCTV we wouldn't have been able to. Some very serious events as well that have happened. We've put temporary cameras up in locality areas where there's been serious antisocial behaviour, and that's been through the funding that yourselves as councillors have put through at times. So those Leeds Watch cameras are absolutely part of our response to antisocial behaviour and crime. I don't know if John wants to.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, absolutely. It's really impactful. One of the first questions that we're asked as investigators when seeking to take a case to court is it recorded on video? And the context that shows the true nature of the offending of an individual, and as well as we were discussing there, the intelligence that then allows us to develop our actions. Yeah, it's really, really pivotal. I think there is something where, when the cameras were first installed, we saw some really challenging areas across Leeds, and the behaviour that we'd seen stopped immediately because those that were responsible for it were so concerned that they'll be captured. I think what happens over time is that people get complacent, they get used to them, the behaviour then degenerates into what we've seen previously. So we're working with the service to reinforce and make that reminder to local people, both to give confidence to report that it's captured on CCTV, and also as a warning to those that are committing it, that those cameras are still there, we still use them, and the real key asset, the investment that has gone into it, has really assisted our investigations.
It's just, I find we've had a number of incidents. We've got 2 cameras in Farnley and Wortley. Number of incidents that took place both under the cameras, and we weren't able to get any, because fundamentally I see the CCTV cameras as an evidence collection rather than a deterrent. It doesn't deter people. And the 2 incidents, one was the stoning of a bus, and the other was a vandalisation of a brand new notice board that the councillors had paid for to put up, and we couldn't get any, couldn't even capture it. And they're parades of shops or a bus terminus. We've not had any use. It seems to be that the cameras cover the town very well, the city centre, but the outer areas do not get the coverage.
Actually, at this point, can I also bring in Councillor Dowson, who has a supplementary offer on cameras?
I don't know about an offer, but I represent an area that's probably covered by more CCTV cameras than anywhere else apart from the city centre. But we still have people fly tipping, and we still have people committing crimes because they do know where those cameras are and they know how to avoid them. Now, there is the possibility of covert cameras. We're always told that these exist, and provided we can get a location for them that doesn't make the camera itself vulnerable to theft or damage and so on, we can use those. Do you use covert cameras? Do you find them useful? And do we need more?
And can you answer Councillor McCluskey's point that the evidence that the cameras that we do have that are fixed aren't necessarily up to the job of identifying and getting people prosecuted?
Yeah, if I can answer that, I'm sure, Chair. Yes, there are some concerns, of course, with cameras because people are more aware that they cover their faces, they wear hats, whatever, however they do it. So, as part of our investigations, there is the specific camera, but then there's lots of cameras in shops, private CCTV, ring doorbells, etc., etc. And it's that pulling together the whole piece. If there are any occasions where those cameras are either wrongly sighted or there needs to be some development, we work closely with Leeds Watch to review those to make sure that actually that they're in the right place and they're doing what we want them to do, i.e. to deter and to detect. In terms of, just remind me, sorry, the second question specifically?
Covert cameras,
around covert cameras, I'm sorry, yes. Thank you, Chair. Yes, we do use them. You'll appreciate, the use of them is strictly contained within the Regulatory Investigatory Powers Act, so we have to really justify where they're being used. The temporary cameras that are used by Leeds Watch are much more effective, and we'll place those where we've got hotspots of offending, where perhaps there isn't a specific camera already being cited. That is really useful because, as I say, they're really, really visible. But as a general tactic, yes, covert cameras can and can be used and are being used, but with those appropriate safeguards.
Can you just clarify how many covert cameras you have?
I can't, Chair. I don't have those figures to hand. I can try and find out. Bear in mind that West Yorkshire Police will have assets of its own in terms of cameras, as well as LASBAT. So it would be a real piece to try and establish that. But I will do my best for you, Chair.
That'd be very useful, and also the temporary cameras that you have available to you. Councillor Hannan.
Thank you very much, Chair. I really welcome this new strategy on antisocial behaviour. I know I keep on going on about this noise nuisance. Unfortunately, residents that I represent have lost confidence in reporting noise nuisance. They don't feel the response time and outcomes from reporting noise nuisance is effective enough. I think we can't not realise what the problem is, but realise what we can do with this new strategy in terms of going forward. So my question is, how can we give confidence back to residents that the noise nuisance reporting system is effective and will work? Is this what this strategy is going to look at?
Thank you. I know that within your ward there is a specific piece of work that goes on out of hours with regards to noise nuisance. That's obviously a funded piece of work, and we have managed to keep that funding for an additional amount of time. As a local authority, we have a statutory duty to investigate antisocial behaviour, but noise specifically. We pick up anything with regards to noise nuisance again through our processes, which would have people complete noise nuisance diaries. The team will look at all the tools and powers available to us in order to deter that noise if it's evidenced, and we will work with the person who is creating the noise in order to again educate and deter them from doing that. Noise nuisance is dealt with on the same level as antisocial behaviour because it can cause significant nuisance and harm to residents, and we absolutely recognise that. Again, with regards to noise nuisance, our teams have equipment that they can use in order to maintain evidence, and we look at things like abatement notices, community protection warnings and notices, tenancy action if it is local authority housing. We've done seizures, as you're aware, and we also do prosecutions. So the noise nuisance side of antisocial behaviour will always continue to be a priority for us because we do absolutely see how that impacts the residents of Leeds, and that's not going to take any back step to anything else.
Just a supplementary, do you think this process is effective and working? If not, are you looking at including this in the new strategy?
I believe that the process does work. I think that if it didn't, then we would need to relook at it. Again, as I referred to the data mill earlier, we do publish our figures with regards to Section 80 noise abatement notices and the work that we do with that. Again, if it's something that you would like to discuss outside of here specifically, then I'll be happy to pick up that conversation with you to where you think that maybe we could look at making some improvements.
I will definitely take that offer up. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd be happy to be copied in so that we're all aware as board members on those discussions. Councillor Renshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask about the antisocial behaviour and how long the process actually takes, because there's been ongoing situations in my ward that, due to the waiting of the court process, sometimes they then get away with it and there's no action can be taken. And is that fair on the people who are having to suffer the antisocial behaviour as neighbours or within the local community? So I just wondered if there were any actions in place to address that and what was being done.
Thank you, Councillor Renshaw. I think that what we need to take into consideration is that we're not in control of court times and dates and proceedings that happen. We also can struggle with having matters adjourned if we're having to go down that enforcement arm. What we try and do really is look at a more holistic approach and working with individuals for intervention, prevention, education in order to have them, stop that antisocial behaviour. but when it comes to enforcement, unfortunately, we are at the hands of when the court appearances can happen and when we can have those. Also, then we often get adjournments, which does mean that things can take a little bit longer. When you say people often maybe get away with things, maybe that's more on a criminal than antisocial behaviour case. We will try and look for the quickest way to resolve antisocial behaviour. So if that's an injunction, if it's more possession proceedings that can take a lengthy amount of time. Our premises closures are very, very quick and get put in place very quickly, which we find is a great tool and power that we have to use in order to resolve some of the antisocial behaviour that the residents are suffering.
Yeah, can I just say, I can predict on a daily basis where those police cars are going to be parked in my ward and which properties they'll be outside of, because it's just a continuation of the antisocial behaviour from certain adults and young people, and it's ongoing, and it's just not fair on the local community. But also there's the Greenway where the quad bikes and the scooters are up and down threatening people, you know, and is anything being done by the police to address that? Because I understand that the team in the as in Robin Hood ward, which I represent, are not fully staffed. So I don't know if anything's been done about that either.
Councillor Renshaw, do you mind if that point is answered in the next paper? Because there are specific references to it. And the background issue which you referred to, which was the length of time that cases get taken to court, I understand that there is something happening at the moment under the Minister, Shabana Mahmood, around how many days that courts are allowed to sit, because the number of days that they were allowed to sit was reduced under the previous government, and they're looking at seeing whether that can be expanded, and the more days they can sit, the more people they can process in terms of justice. So if we could have an update in terms of what that means for the Leeds courts from community safety team, that would be really helpful, I think, just to give us background information. I now have Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, everyone. I know we've talked a lot about kind of reporting and enforcement issues. I just wondered whether there's any work ongoing in Leeds around restorative justice, and if there is, what kind of results we've seen from that so far. Thank you.
Thank you. We're working with the Youth Justice Service day in, day out with regards to our policies. When it comes to actual figures, I can get you that information, but we do make referrals regularly to turn around, and we look at that voluntary intervention work. Again, it's something that we look at, that holistic approach first off, especially with young people. We don't want to go down that enforcement route with them. It might be something that we bring back from YGS.
Thank you. And is that only with youth services? Is it done with general cases as well?
Our intervention is with every case that we do. If we can go into early intervention, we've done deep diving into antisocial behaviour in adults, especially around when they're gathered in locality areas. We look at those individuals and see where they may need support, so whether they need referrals to forward Leeds, mental health services, housing services. We do that intervention with them also.
Thank you. And our final question from Councillor Ali.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to ask you, what support is available for a victim of antisocial behaviour?
We've got our support from Housing Leeds and their tenancy support team. We have a mediation service as well. We can make referrals depending on what their needs are. There are mental health services, there are other supported living providers that we can support them with. It's just dependent on the victim themselves and what their requirements are. Sometimes it might be that they just want a call regularly, they want an email check-up, they want to see us face to face. We will tailor what that victim needs for their needs, not for our needs. And if that means after 5 o'clock in the evening, that's what we'll do. If it means, like say, a preferred method of contact, then we will make sure that we do that for that individual.
Thank you very much. And I believe there's more detail in the papers that are coming up next on victim support. Okay, so we'll now move on to those papers, if that's okay. Councillor Harlan.
Thank you, Chair. Just as you bring this to a close, I'd like to thank Heather for stepping in at the last minute. It's her first scrutiny appearance, so I think she's done really well. But also, if you, with residents, if they are afraid of reporting, I would advise and advocate Crime Stoppers that we work with. And we have a real advocate in Alan, who is the Crime Stopper Leeds lead, who's willing to go to forums, community committees, etc. So I would advocate that. And I'd always say, please arrange a visit to Leeds Watch. It's brilliant. If you want to go as a board, I think you should visit.
Thank you, Councillor Harland. And that gave me time to reflect on what we were meant to do with the recommendations for this paper, which is that we formally propose and second it to go forward. Do we have any volunteers to propose the endorsement of the strategy? Councillor Haigh, thank you very much. And who would like to second? Councillor Hannon, that's much appreciated. And we can now move on to those next items on the agenda. So there is item 9, which is the Safer Leeds annual update, and also item 10, which is the Leeds Neighbourhoods and Partnership Policing update. Obviously, those two cross-reference quite significantly, so we thought it would be useful to actually have those papers taken at the same time, so that members can have the same subject matter mentioned just the once. So, who would like to introduce those papers? Because we have both Chief Inspector McNiff and we have Councillor Harland.
We've got another guest. We've got Matt Scott as well.
Oh, Matt Scott's come. Did you want to talk about this?
And Mark will do our...
Oh, very good. So, Mark can go first then. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Apologise for what is a lengthy report, but actually I think we've got an awful lot of good news within this report that shows the strength of work that's been done across the city. I also want to highlight that this isn't just a council team that's done this. This has been about a concerted effort by a number of partners across the whole city. Without that joined up cohesion between our organisations, we would not get to where we're getting to. The results, I feel, are really strong. They are really positive. There are things we still want to do. Members may recall we brought the new strategy for 25-28 to the board in February of this year. So what we're reporting back here is, again, slightly the old strategy, but there is some crossover to the new strategy, given some of the continuing and emerging themes. Perhaps if Matt wants to introduce the policing aspect, and then perhaps back to you, Chair, for questions.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So I'm Matt Scott. I'm the Neighbourhood Superintendent in Leeds. In terms of our paper, I think it reflects some of the great work that's gone on in policing over the last 12 months. It sort of takes cognizance of some of the challenges, because there are many in policing at the minute, which I think is shared across the wider the wider scope of public bodies. But I think there are some, based on the sort of increasing and ever-increasing complexity of crime, the increasing complexity around protecting vulnerable people, as well as the more traditional neighbourhood crime that we're still trying to tackle and focus upon. I think there's some really good work, and the report reflects that, I hope, and gives that confidence that policing is very much invested in Leeds and protection of the people within Leeds. But obviously we can go into the more specifics as we move through.
I think before the questioning starts, we just need to emphasise that the board does recognise the huge amount of work that goes ahead in terms of doing multi-agency partnership work and the amount of effort that goes into creating strategy documents such as these. So don't feel that any critique is recognising, what's the word, anything which is less than the top effort from all of the professionals involved in the different services. So we'll now take questions from the board. I have Councillor McCluskey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the paper and the amount of work that's gone in. The actual work that's behind this paper means a lot. I mean, the crime decrease of 4.1% is a marvellous result, but why don't the public know this? Why do they still feel things are getting worse? How does these results and this evidence get better communicated to make people feel that this work is going on?
Yeah, I think it's always a challenge communicating with the public and providing that degree of reassurance. I mean, when I look at sort of victim satisfaction rates and other things that would kind of indicate good and strong satisfaction by people who use the police, those are all on a positive trend. I think the difficulty around sort of those communications is we do try our best around Facebook, various other social media and a lot of the other ways that people typically get the news now and receive those communications. We try our best to engage with partners such as the likes of Leeds Bid and people like that to sort of spread that word through the retail community and the business community as well in terms of sort of the work we're doing at the moment. I think largely speaking, people do appreciate the fact that there are challenges within policing in terms of sort of the financial challenging and resourcing challenges that we face. But I think people are aware and probably better informed than they ever have been around crime figures and crime stats. I think they're important, definitely, but I think the way people feel about it's probably more important. And that challenge in terms of visibility of policing and the sort of the safer streets priorities that have been sort of placed upon us around as part of the safer streets mission that the government have embarked upon is one of the key issues and one of the things that we're sort of really keen to embrace and really make the most of in terms of making people feel as though there's been a reduction in crime, despite the fact we can talk and wax lyrical about statistics all we want, but people will still point to the drug dealer at the end of the street or the antisocial use of motorcycles. So yes, it's a challenge. We do put that out there. It's available in all sorts of places, but as I say, I think the feel's as important as the stats.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
A couple of things. One is the increase in shoplifting in my area is getting to almost epidemic levels, to be quite frank. And how do we address that? How do we get the stores to take this more seriously rather than just writing it off and saying, right, we'll have X amount occurring? What more can we do about that? And the other side of the coin is the road safety PSPO that we've got in Leeds. Where are we with getting that implemented the way some residents would like it implemented in terms of motoring offences?
Okay. Is that on now? Thank you. Sorry. So yeah, I'll answer the first part about theft from shop, and then I'll pass over to Chief Inspector McNiff to talk about sort of Vision Zero and the issues around road safety. Theft from shop is a really difficult and epidemic issue, really, across the country, and we've seen sort of more and more audacious criminality around shop theft. We're keenly focused on this within Leeds, and what I'll say from a policing point of view is that we have our own kind of sub-team of investigators that look at specifically the most prolific shop theft suspects, We're doing all we can around criminal behaviour orders. So for those of them that come persistently to our attention, we manage those via criminal behaviour orders. That enables us to sort of almost make that crime of shoplifting actually a business burglary, which attracts higher sentences, and we do whatever we can to sort of charge burglary offences if that's appropriate, rather than just theft of shop. We've invested significantly in the city centre in terms of neighbourhood staffing as part of the neighbourhood uplift. We see the greatest number of our shoplifting offences, and that's not in any way to sort of minimise the harm that it does in outside the city, because these are small businesses that are significantly affected by it. But within the city, we have invested significantly in terms of neighbourhood, as part of the neighbourhood uplift. And in the neighbourhood uplift areas that have been identified to us by the government, again, there's been an increase in terms of the overtime that we're offering and the support in terms of high visibility policing. And also, I've now put in place an engagement officer that just works within the city centre in terms of engaging retail and other business sectors in terms of protecting themselves from the theft from shop and how they can go about protecting themselves. So from a policing point of view, we are heavily invested in it and are making more moves to try and reduce that crime. And I think we've seen a bit of a plateauing in terms of theft of shop offences now. It is still increasing, but at a much lower rate than it has done in the past. In terms of encouraging business to do the right thing, I've mentioned Leeds bid already today, but I'm conscious that focus is mainly on the city centre. We do all we can to engage. We will put our crime prevention officers into businesses to discuss what options they have in terms of reducing crime and making it as difficult and as a hostile environment for criminals. The reality of it is, though, there is an element of resourcing, both for them and us, in terms of what they're prepared to invest and what we can realistically invest around theft from shop. But I suppose the reassurance I want to give you is that it is absolutely one of our priorities, because we recognise the economic damage it's doing across Leeds. And unless there's any questions, I'll pass you on to Mr McNiff to answer that, the road traffic one.
Yes, there is a specific question. We were discussing earlier that... Okay, well...
Sorry, no, I wasn't sure if you'd
He can add to my question. Yes, we had a discussion around the expectation that was announced by the government that there would be town centre focus where police services were requested to show some attention to antisocial behaviour and shoplifting, etc. in town centre areas. But they were also going to be asked to provide specific stats around it, so it wasn't really optional. And one of the things that we were interested to know is which town and district centres in the Leeds district are included in that strategy, so that we can all understand what we should expect to see as local members as part of that strategy, which of course feeds into the question from Councillor Anderson around the shoplifting scourge, which is growing.
Yes, so the areas that are considered within that, and as I say, these have been given to us by the Home Office around, these are the areas that they've identified as particular problem areas. We believe there are others as well as that.
Sorry, when you say areas, do you mean subject areas or do you mean specific geographies?
Specific geographies. So they will give us, the areas that they've given us is Otley Town Centre, Wetherby, Morley, Crossgates, and then the centre of Leeds. They are the areas that they've given, so geographic areas.
And did they justify how those areas had been selected? Did they give you a criteria for selection?
Yeah, to a degree. Fundamentally, it sits around kind of volume of footfall, really, in terms of the areas that have been selected, which is why I would hasten to add, we sort of looked at that and compared that with some of the crime statistics that we see, and we would perhaps prioritise in a slightly different way.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful. Right, we now have Councillor Dowson.
It's just on that last point. You said we would have prioritised differently. Are you going to prioritise differently? That would be question number one.
Yeah, of course. So there's an absolute, I suppose, an expectation that we will provide some degree of additional resources to those areas. However, when you look at some of those areas in terms of the levels of criminality that we see, they're not necessarily, and all areas are important, but there's not necessarily the justification around the fact that these are particularly high harm areas in terms of the amount of crime and antisocial behaviour that may be occurring with any one of them. So whilst, yes, we have, as the government have requested, as the Home Office has requested, we have provided a plan around each one of those to ensure that the best can be done within those towns and cities, within those towns. However, what I would also say is, for example, Armley has been an area that we've self-selected and said that actually we see that there are some issues within Armley that have been long in the tooth and need tackling, and we've invested additional staff in there specifically because we feel as though that's an area that's appropriate to do so. On the back of that, then, what we then do is include that within our reports and our returns so that the Home Office can see the full total of what the activity is that's going on within West Yorkshire and more specifically within the Leeds district for us.
As a rebuttal to that, I personally would like to know what criteria you are using to select these secondary sites that you actually feel are the sites that you are getting most of the issues at that do not appear on the government's dictated list of sites.
Yes, so there's an element of, with any sort of uplift around how we sort of spread those resources around, and I make reference to this because there is a danger of being very, very fair in the allocation in terms of putting them in every town, but that then results in an officer being in each individual one, and it spreads those resources too thin. What I would say is, in terms of the selection process of that, there are various metrics that we could apply to it, and that we did apply to it, in terms of whether that's crime, whether it's antisocial behaviour, whether it's calls for service, whether it's general feedback in terms of what we're getting from the community. But ultimately all of those things play into a decision. Now, there's an element of every area within Leeds we'd like to provide additional resources to. The uplift will continue. There's an additional 13,000 officers and staff promised by the end of the Parliament. And, you know, hopefully we'll see an uplift in every area to enhance the neighbourhood footprint. But ultimately it's a case of, what do we look like in terms of calls for service? What does antisocial behaviour? What does theft from shop look like? What does serious youth violence look like, etc., etc., which enables us to kind of narrow down. And obviously there's an element of significant element of professional judgment in all that to then be able to select an area.
Sorry, just to come back, because I wasn't asking that every area gets the same result.
No.
I was asking for what criteria you were going to use to potentially select where you are going to put your currently limited resources that may improve at some point in the future. But we absolutely recognise all the issues that you've said. I was just asking, and you've said that you wouldn't necessarily have chosen some of these areas. I shop in these areas and I know some of the issues. I also shop in other areas. Ask my husband, I like shopping, that have many more issues than these. So you do need a criteria, but I absolutely get the point that you made about professional judgment being one of those criteria elements that you can't actually tangibly touch. But it would be nice to understand the things that you can tell us about how you choose those areas, just so that councillors from across the area, which is the second largest city outside London, how we understand where you are putting your resources and why.
Councillor Dawson says there's no need to come back, but there is. Because the issue around deployment is interesting for us, because of course we all have our own neighbourhood policing teams, and of course their geography takes in some of our town and district centres, so it would be part of their day-to-day, wouldn't it, to keep an eye on them. However, since this is a specific programme which has been brought forward, and your extra resource by the end of the Parliament is long-term, does this mean that the officers that are coming forward initially are being prioritised to those areas which you mentioned earlier? And also, it would be useful to have some information around, I saw something in the press from Wakefield, where their response to Wakefield Town Centre was that the officers which were going to be used were 2/3 PCs and 1/3 special constables, but no mention of PCSOs. What would the ratios look like for Leeds, potentially?
So they're all police officers, is what I can clarify to you from the start. We've got to get in position an additional 27 officers by the end of July. They are all in place and added to the neighbourhoods teams. What that looks like in terms of sort of specifics is there's been a significant investment, as I've said already, of a number of officers uplifting each team within the city centre, and then there's been an uplift in terms of officers to the Armley ward. Then beyond that, then most in terms of the other areas that we talk about in terms of Otley, Wetherby, Morley and Crossgates, that's been managed by shifting to some degree in terms of sort of priorities over the summer period, because there's an element within the neighbourhood uplift, there's also the summer surge activity that needs to occur. So there's an element of kind of just changing the posture slightly towards the town centres becoming an enhanced priority, for want of a better expression, and that's been supported via overtime and a specific plans that focus on engagement, antisocial behaviour and theft from shop that enhance the current plans that are already in place, if that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Haigh.
Thank you. We've already briefly mentioned PSPOs, and in the report, one of the reports it says that these are being reviewed in collaboration with the police, and PSPOs can be a really useful tool. I think there's a couple of issues. One is that people understanding what they are doing in particular places, what behaviours are being managed, and also, in the review, are we looking at what it is that we do want those PSPOs to manage, because there's quite a wide range of potential powers. Now, if this review is taking place, first, can you just tell us a bit more about it, and then perhaps we might want to take more of an interest as a board.
Thank you, Councillor. Currently, we have 5 PSPOs across the city, which is a large reduction in what we've previously had. Those are tackling specific issues. There's a motor vehicle one, which is citywide. We have one in Hare Hills, one in Headingley, one in the city centre, and we are reviewing those and seeing what's best practice when dealing with the issues that they highlight. They each have a number of matters that they concentrate on, such as drinking alcohol, urination, and just to name a few things. And actually, again, the PSPOs are there where we look at that engagement and education first before we enforce. What we need to review them is what does that enforcement look like? How many tickets are we issuing with regards to enforcement? How many people are we engaging with on the street? What does that look like for our services? And how are we giving that the person power to be out there on the street at that particular time and handling those situations? So I think that what we are doing when we look at the PSPOs and the review of them is what's the behaviour that's continuing to happen, where has the PSPO made those things stop, and maybe where we might need to make some changes to maybe include some other specific objectives that we need to achieve. So I think that it's always good for us to review what we have, what we put in place, what we've resolved, and what actually we need to do more work upon when it comes to PSPOs. And is that the right legislation to go down when it comes to tackling those specific issues? So again, it's something that we would take on board with you all with regards to Councillor Dowson's comments earlier about her shopping in specific areas and the things that she sees as a member of the public because unless it's reported to us, it's very difficult for us to be able to put those changes into place. So I think that they do work in the areas that we have them, but we just need to review how they're working.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, PSPOs is another area of business, as we discussed earlier, which is very much that we do in collaboration really closely together. When it comes to some of the history of us applying for PSPOs, were we to apply for a citywide PSPO, we'd probably find that the evidence base wasn't met and it wouldn't be granted at court, because they're designed to be very specific local responses to issues. Then the part of the review process then allows us to say, well, look, it's worked in a particular locality within Leeds, actually there's a need, and that evidence base is growing to be able to broaden it across the whole of Leeds, and then we'll get more success that way through the courts.
Yeah, thanks. And I think, Chair, that's something that perhaps we could look at in conjunction with that review, because I do think, you know, we can bring experience of different areas, and also maybe some of the issues that may not already be addressed by PSPOs, or maybe that we think is excessive in some other areas. I think that would be a really useful piece of work and perhaps quite interesting for us.
Could we think about a recommendation to add to the paper at the end of the meeting? Yeah? Okay. Thank you. I now have Councillor Hannan.
Thank you very much, Chair. Point number 4, your voice survey. Can anybody share what the evidence is that you've got from the public consultation? And does that determine where your priorities lie in terms of policing? And if you've got the information now, you know, I'd be grateful to hear what that evidence looks like.
Councillor Hannan, which page was that again?
Sorry, I'm struggling to find that, Councillor Hannan. Thank you.
Mark, it's referenced on page 2 of the cover report for the Safer Leeds update.
Thank you. Apologies for that. I struggled to find it in the myriad of length of paper.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. What we do in terms of the wider work is we do link in with other surveys. To run that just purely within the city would be difficult to get the strength of evidence that we would need. We also gather information from feedback received by each of our services and teams, so including the antisocial behaviour surveys. What customers are telling us becomes really important. So those people that have used our service, this helps us shape what we do, how we respond, and it probably throughout the report it's maybe not as clear as it could be in terms of where that voice fits through that, but actually it shapes what the future strategy looks like. So what you've seen with the ASB strategy area, community views are essential to that. We need to make sure that we provide the service that people are saying they need from us within the constraints of the legislation and everything we have to provide. So we do repeat this annually. We do use other surveys that's done by the combined authority. But actually community intelligence is the best intelligence we've got, but also using what's been reported to us, that tells us a great deal as well in terms of what is happening, and also those key hotspot locations as well for targeted intervention.
think my point was, does the priority change then going forward, what the public are saying, and based on what you just shared with us?
Yeah, so the new strategy this year has changed. So it refines, and we do review each year whether the strategy is still current. So whilst it's a 4-year strategy, as we're preparing the annual report, it's telling us that we maybe need to shift direction. Crime and community safety is fairly dynamic. Had we written this report 2 years ago, we may not have considered some of the cohesion issues that we now consider within the report as well. So we do need to respond dynamically, and that's how we work alongside of the police. Chief Inspector McNiff actually sits on our senior leadership team, so there is that dialogue ongoing throughout.
Thank you. Can I bring something up on that subject area, if that's okay? Now, there are 3 different references I'm going to refer to. So one is page 132, and the other one is page 123, just to be confusing. And one refers to reference to neighbourhood crime, because one of the things that's notable about the strategy is that a lot of it is to do with citywide strategic major crime issues, and less so around what the force considers neighbourhood crime other than antisocial behaviour. And then in page 123, of course, it talks about the importance of community cohesion and how that is being developed in terms of being in priority, and EDI. And it sort of fits in with your voice survey, because those surveys tend to have quite a low take-up, especially if they're online. I know that WICA uses your voice, and they have a similar level of interaction from the community. And you're very keen to make sure that EDI characteristics are responded to in how we police. But one of the frustrations, for instance, that we have in the neighbourhood area, it talks about vehicle-related crime, nuisance vehicle-related crime, and we have a really big issue in my area, and I know it is in other areas, around speeding vehicles and pavement parking. And one of the issues around pavement parking is that it has differential effects on different parts of the population. So, for instance, if you're able-bodied and you can walk around a car, that's fine. If you're in a mobility scooter, it is a serious impediment to your freedom of movement. And when we ask our local neighbourhood policing teams to respond to nuisance parking, for instance, the response that we often get back is that is a low-level crime, and we won't be able to respond to it in a consistent fashion because generally we've got more important crime to attend to elsewhere. And I think that sort of reflects that it's quite hard sometimes for some voices to be heard when somebody else's low-level crime is a pretty serious crime to somebody else because of their circumstances and their equality characteristic. So, sorry, this is a very big introduction. Are we going to actually spend any time looking at how we respond to such conundrums as this, whereby for a professional service it's not a priority, but for the community they're meant to be serving it is? And how do we overcome that as part of our community safety strategy, which it says is committed to making sure it responds to equality, diversity and inclusion excellence? Oh, Councillor Haigh wishes to add.
Yes, because the issues, particularly around parking and what the Chair said about EDI issues, but also danger of injury and risk to life by inconsiderate and illegal parking. Councillor McSkin and I visited one of our primary schools only yesterday to see what was a completely unsafe situation with those levels of parking. So I do understand, that there's lots of big crime, but these little ones that people can consistently not have to worry about being brought to task for really do impact communities. I mean, I won't go into any detail about the issues we have when Leeds United play at home, but that's also a very similar issue. And we have worked with our neighbourhood police team, and they have been able to bring a bit of resource to it. But these are predictable points in time and locations where we know people are going to be committing offences, but there's very little action seen to be taken against those people.
Yeah, if I can, am I okay to come in on that? Yeah. So, yeah, thank you for that. The reality of this is it's not really an easy answer to give, but there are, as you know, significant resourcing pressures within policing. Neighbourhood teams are engaged in an awful lot of things in terms of sort of keeping people safe. I accept the fact that there is definitely some elements of what appears to be sort of local and neighbourhood priorities that the public would raise as really significant issues to them. And I accept what you say around how it does affect people differently to all of these issues. However, as a professional policing force, we have to sort of consider then how do we balance that off against some of the really high harm crime that we see within Leeds District, and how do we keep people safe from really significant harm that is all too prevalent, sadly. What that ultimately ends up meaning is that we have to invest significant amount of staff and resourcing into things like CSE, domestic abuse, and all those other things that the public don't typically see us dealing with, because it's all sort of within police stations, and largely speaking, unless you're directly affected by that crime, you don't see a police officer dealing with it. That then means that the sort of uniform front line that might deal with the problems that you're talking about is thin, and they are challenged with other priorities as well, which ultimately makes it very difficult to deliver on these things in that consistent manner that people would like. And I'm at a point in terms of sort of prioritising neighbourhood policing around, well, if we are going to deal with that, which one of those really high harm, serious priorities are we going to stop doing? And that is the reality of policing, I'm afraid, at the moment.
Yes, well, I'm sure we can take that up in the final paper, actually, around resourcing and priorities. Councillor Haigh.
Whilst I completely understand and accept what you're saying about resources and serious criminality, when we're talking about, I mean, not just people's inability to move freely and being restricted in safe travel, but we all know that the ultimate harm is probably the death of a child outside of school, and that does happen. So whilst I completely accept everything you say, it is really, really important that our children are safe going to school as well.
Okay. Chief Inspector McNiff, did you want to come in at that point?
Yes, I will do. Thank you, Chair. I think the reassurance I wanted to offer Councillor is that we do have a lot of competing demands as police. Obviously, our resources are finite, and we prioritise public safety above all. But just to give you that reassurance, for those areas that we don't tackle and we're not able to tackle ourselves through the development, for example, when talking about parking to parking services, this is where we work so well and so closely with our partners across Leeds. Where we have these specific issues, I've met with councillors previously to talk through, for example, things like double yellow lines and the support that we can get from parking services, so that we can make sure that those issues, that yes, there can be high harms, they're not objectively so day in, day out, but there's a real risk there. So this is where our collaboration is so effective, because we actually make sure that we don't just walk away from them, we actually signpost and we work really closely with the people that can actually further that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Renshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to know whether or not we've got a full team of policing in Ardsley and Robin Hood. I got told at a community group meeting that we didn't have, and the two PCSOs that attended, one was from Marley and one was from Marley North, because we didn't have any that were covering Ardsley and Robin Hood. They also stated to me that recruitment was on a hold, so I didn't know whether or not that was true and when recruitment was going to start back up. And along the Greenway, talking about antisocial behaviour, along the Greenway from Alton Robin Hood through to Rothwell, it's mentioned at every tasking meeting that there's incidents happening along there that are making people feel unsafe and uncomfortable. And I know the off-road bike team have been working hard on that one, and I'd like to thank them for that. But people are still feeling unsafe, and there's incidents going along there with quad bikes and electric scooters, and I don't know if you've any recommendations as to what action we can actually take.
Councillor Renshaw, I think we can expand the question to say, what level of information can we expect to get at a community committee level? Because we're going through a community committee review, and one of the things that we want to make sure is happening is that there is some comparative data, for instance. It's something that which hasn't been provided in these reports in terms of differentials between neighbourhood policing teams, but it might be quite useful at a community committee level. And on the issue of electric bikes, because it saves us asking a second question, at page 103, which is the part of the agenda which talks about the Leeds City Centre policing team, there's a reference to electrically powered bikes, and it was brought up at the last scrutiny meeting when we were going through performance indicators, where we were interested in knowing how we can more effectively measure incidents and also respond to them. Now in this, there was an interesting phrase that was used, and it says at the bottom of page 103, in the absence of effective legislation and regulation. So it sort of recognises the frustration of the police in terms of being able to take action to dangerous behaviour on electric bikes. But in the next item, it talks about peddler enforcement and strategic response. There are specific actions which are taking place to fill gaps that are identified in legislation. So the core cities are being involved, and the Minister is being involved to amend the Peddlers Act. Is there no initiative being made to overcome the absence of effective legislation and regulation on electric bikes?
So, how would you like me to start? Would you like me to start answering that question first, or come directly to you? Okay, right. Well, I'll do it in order then. So in terms of sort of policing numbers and PCSO recruitment, I can reassure you that policing numbers in terms of police officers have increased in the neighbourhood world. So there's been an increase, as I've said already, of 27 police officers across Leeds, and all teams are fully staffed in terms of police officers. In terms of PCSOs, yes, there's been a recruitment freeze, and that's as a direct result of some of the financial challenges that we face within policing, as do many other public bodies. But what we'd like to think of is that as the neighbourhood uplift sort of reaches more maturity and develops over the course of this Parliament, we should hopefully see more investment within neighbourhoods, and you should see more officers and hopefully specials and others supporting neighbourhoods in the future. In terms of your meeting, I'm not sure what's happened there, and I can only apologise, but I'll make sure that we pick that up and that there's someone there next time. Electric motorbikes. So yeah, there's some real difficulties with these electric bikes, not least of all because the legislation that sits around them covers half of them and not the other half, because ultimately if there's pedals on a bike, it all of a sudden then becomes an electrically powered, or rather an electrically assisted pedal bike, which then subsequently doesn't necessarily fall within the legislation. But we are seeing them modified to become really dangerous bikes, and our off-road motorcycle team took one off somebody that was capable of doing 60 miles an hour the other day. So that kind of gives an impression of how difficult and wicked an issue it is, and how important it is we tackle it. What I would say is in terms of sort of lobbying government and that understanding of how we need to change legislation, the answer to this is that electric bikes and mopeds are required to have insurance, MOT and all the other things that we would expect and become proper motor vehicles, and there's this confusion around being able to sort of buy them in normal retail outlets with no kind of obvious sign that they're not legal for use on the roads is part of what of the challenge really around it. We have seen an uplift in the antisocial use of electric motorbikes and scooters, and we've seen a downturn in the use of sort of more traditional petrol-powered bikes. Our off-road motorbike team are very, very keen to target this, and I'm actively exploring some other options, some other tactical options to target it in terms of dealing with the real sort of criminality around it. But as you'll all be fully appreciative of, pursuit and intervention when people are on bikes, usually children, is an extremely difficult and dangerous activity.
So to answer the question, there isn't anything being put together by any organisation to amend the deficiency in regulation, and it could be something that could be taken up, for instance, by the police and crime commissioners.
Can I just say that it is something that's being taken up by the Mayor with the relevant minister. We've already raised it with them, and we'll continue to do so.
Chief Inspector.
Thank you. I was just going to talk through some of the how it manifests itself in the city centre, which is slightly different to that we're seeing in the outer areas and specific wards, which there in the city centre it tends to be people on these similar motorbikes, but they're actually food deliverers working for companies. As you'll expect, we're working really closely with city centre, with city development, city centre management on this, and with the companies that are involved. They will and do say that they have limited ability to influence the action of the riders, because somebody may be wearing one company's uniform but actually on that occasion delivering for another one because they've accepted a job, if you like, from a rival organisation. So we're working really closely with them to try and stop some of that. I appreciate there are some difficulties around it because currently the city centre isn't designated as a pedestrian zone per se, so cycles aren't prohibited, and I understand that city development are talking through with elected members around how to address that as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Anderson.
To go back a bit, to talking about local priorities, is there any plans to look again at the way that packed meetings are being run to try and make them more... They may work well in other wards, but in some other wards they're not very successful. I'll give you an example. My ward, Adland Wharfdale ward, there are, according to, I just looked at the screen up just now, there are 3 objectives, all to do with one area, one smallish area of my ward. The vast majority of the ward, I'd go probably as far as getting 60–70%, are even mentioned as a priority, the issues that they've got. And why is that? That's because the packed meeting, because the police won't hold packed meetings in the various locations. They'll only hold one in Adland Wharfdale. Well, there's umpteen villages, so they're not going to go from one place to the other. So, and then when they do try and hold them, they hold them at a time that I can't make it. And if they just ask in advance, I'll tell you what dates I'm free, and then I can go along and give some guidance. The last time one was done, they asked a PCSO to go along and run it, and this PCSO was taken to the cleaners by my residents, who were able to quote back the PSPO, quote back what this is happening, quote back what's happening elsewhere in the city, and this poor PCSO couldn't answer back because they've not got the authority to make the decision as to why police aren't being deployed on X as opposed to Y. Why is it that down in other parts of the city they can do it? They were left totally exposed. So what I'm basically saying is, how can we ensure that the inspector, or at least the sergeant responsible, takes the packed meetings, takes responsibility and explains why they are deciding not to put police in a particular part of the ward, not blaming the PCSO who can't make the decision at all, even if she wanted to. How do we renew pacts?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Yeah, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. I've got a lot of experience in running neighbourhood policing teams and packed meetings, the partners and community together. For those where it's slipped their mind what the acronym is exactly that. We make ourselves available We try not to dictate to individuals and communities what and where will be available to them, and this is one of the reasons why we're trying to expand our contact points as well for those that are not able to make the packed meetings. Traditionally, there have been difficulties around packed meetings. You will clearly know your own ward far better than I will, Councillor, but traditionally there have been difficulties in accessing public buildings at a time where communities can get there. Because we've seen through budget restraints, etc., that actually some of the public space that there is that had been available is no longer so, which means that we end up with a smaller number of packed meetings confined into times and places where other activities aren't taking place there. Absolutely, we need to support our PCSOs, and in answer to your broader question, well, the responsibility is on those that run and are responsible for the neighbourhood policing teams in the police to make sure that they're representative and they're accessible to everybody to understand what the priorities are in that area. I'll take that back with my counterparts that are responsible for those neighbourhood policing teams, and we'll make sure that actually there's, in terms of other reviews that are ongoing at the moment, that's something that we'll look at urgently. But I welcome it and thank you for your feedback.
Thank you very much. That concludes the questions on those two items. Thank you very much for the full and frank responses. And we're now going to move on to review our recommendations. Oh, sorry, Councillor McCluskey, did you want to come in?
Sorry, I did ask for a question.
I beg your pardon, we'll extend it a little bit further. It better be a good one.
Oh, excellent. Public solving groups featured on Dewsbury Road and in Holbeck with good effect. Is there any plan to expand that?
Thank you, Councillor. We put problem-solving groups in areas where there are more longer-term issues that we need to resolve. There is currently a problem-solving group being set up in the Headingley ward, and there are other groups in other locality areas as and when they're required. As again I referred to earlier, it brings environmental services, ASB, housing together. If there is a problem-solving wider network to deal with, yes, they will be set up where they need to be set up in those locality areas in order to resolve whatever issues we need to, whether that's short-term or more longer-term issues. We did have one in Holbeck that did what it needed to do, and they withdrew from Holbeck, and that work just continues. Dewsbury Road has been a longer, the area's been changed, and like I say, Headingley has just been set up at the moment with the input of the ward councillors.
Thank you, Chair. It's probably worth me giving some background from a policing perspective. If you look at the various meetings that we have and our abilities to engage with people, we've got our contact points and our packed meetings that we've just discussed. They then feed into our tasking arrangements. Normally, for the majority of the work that takes place in a locality, those tasking arrangements are adequate. The information that we get from them allows us to deploy our officers and then work on that problem solving. Where it's, as has been described, a really protracted, entrenched issue that those tasking arrangements are not adequate for, that's where we'll set up, in conjunction with our partners in Lasbat, we'll set up those extraordinary meetings, if you like, so that we can actually have that real focus. And that's where we'll seek to bring in other colleagues, whether it's our Lasbat officers within the localities, or dependent on the area, it may be somebody such as Leodis that would bring in to really have that focus on that area. And it comes back to sort of some of the wider discussions around where we deploy our resources, and it shouldn't be seen that the resource deployed in one particular area is to the detriment of another. It just means that we're trying to look at those areas where the real significant harm is taking place, prioritise those, not overlook those where we're not currently as active, and then move on to those in rotation. So it's an ongoing body of work across the whole of the city.
Thank you. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the two papers we've been discussing. We have some recommendations which will be added onto one of those papers, which is most appropriate. And it's just to review that will be to recommend engagement with Scrutiny in regard to the ongoing review of the suite of PSPOs in the city. And the second one is to request the correspondence between the Mayor and the Minister regarding insufficiency of legislation and regulation in relation to e-bikes and e-scooters, so that we can endorse that as well as a body. Okay, thanks very much. And we'll now move on to the final item of business, which is an update from the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime. And of course we have Alison Lowe with us, and who is always welcome to these meetings and always gives good value. So we will hand over to you to introduce the item, if that's all right.
Thank you for inviting me again. I need to say in advance, I've got a meeting with the Policing Minister at 1 o'clock, so I need to leave 22. Sorry about that. Yeah, I won't speak to the paper because you've already. I'll just answer any questions that you might have.
Excellent. Okay, who would like to go first with questions to Councillor... No, not Councillor Lowe. Deputy Mayor Alison Lowe. Councillor Dowson.
Thank you for coming. Mayor Brabin made a particular issue about violence against women and girls, and I know many initiatives have come forward. I wonder if you could just talk us through what's ongoing at the moment and some successes and some areas where you think we need to do more work.
Wow, it's a very big subject. We're doing a lot of stuff. So Tracy and I, because of our own lived experience and our determination to support West Yorkshire Police to have a better relationship with the survivors and victims of violence against women and girls, as well as wanting to have a different conversation with men and boys who we feel are key allies in this space. We've spent the last 4 years highlighting the issue of violence against women and girls, and we've also commissioned a strategy on men and boys because they are both perpetrators but also victims as well. So we wanted to make sure that that was all captured. So we've had a system approach to VOG in the way that we've worked. So first and foremost, we've co-produced the work that we've done with the VOG sector, with survivors, with victims through victim support and our other contracted services. So everything we've done has been victim-led. And so, for example, we co-produced a Safety of Women and Girls strategy, which outlined some key areas that we needed to focus on, which was education, behaviours, safe spaces and engagement with the sector, and that meant the third sector, the VOG sector. And under those headings, we've rolled out a series of activity. We've tried to influence behaviour through education programmes. So we've done bystander programmes with universities, colleges. We've worked with West Yorkshire Police on their PolEd programme, which is rolled out to now 96% of all schools, that's high schools and primary schools across West Yorkshire. When we started, it was 36%, it's now 96%. And VOG is one of the most popular group of courses that PolEd delivers. We developed the Just Don't campaign, which was about behaviour change, bringing men and boys alongside us to have those different conversations with their peers. It's being shared over 8 million times, and we hope that that's starting a different conversation with those people it needs to. We invested in safe spaces. In Leeds, of course, many of you will have seen the van that's there on a Saturday night, but we replicated that across the whole of West Yorkshire, and we've also ensured that through our commissioning strategy we've continued to invest in our VOG third sector. But more than that, we've listened to the voices of victims and survivors who have told us about some of the systemic issues affecting them and their feelings of safety. So, for example, public transport. How can we get to and from work, college, social engagements, whatever it is. So using her BSIP money, Bus Service Improvement Plan, which you could only get because you've got a mayor, Tracy was able to invest £1 million in a safer travel team, which is 15 PCSOs and a sergeant to sit on our bus network. It doesn't sound like a lot, but sitting alongside that, on the M card, there is a drop-down menu, a safety tool that anyone, man, woman, child, can complete to say where they feel most safe or least safe on that bus network. which bus stations, which bus stops, which is it the number 7 bus from wherever, and then those that's real-time access by West Yorkshire Police. It took us a long time to get that interface with WICA and the police, but we've now got it. And the sergeant who runs that team has real-life access, and he will deploy resources based on that information. And we know that incidents have dropped by over 20% as a result of that investment in the safer travel team. Complaints around bus stations such as Keighley, for example, have massively reduced. And we're just doing a big piece of work in Leeds bus station, where because of the lovely summer and some associated issues, we're working with the Leeds City Council to focus that service on the bus station here in Leeds. Women told us they didn't feel safe going out at night, so Tracy rolled out Ask for Angela. Most pubs and clubs have now signed up to Ask for Angela across the whole of West Yorkshire, but Leeds was the leading local authority in that regard. And we recently did an audit, because there's no point having it if you don't check in whether or not it's working. We recently did an audit in Headingley and Leeds City Centre, and 92% of all the evening economy that we visited passed the Ask for Angela and other associated questions that were asked about spiking, for example, and if you know, someone was injured, a woman or a man was injured, what would they do? So 92% passed, and then there was action plans for the other 8%. I was at the feedback with all the nighttime economy providers, and it was really positive. Kirkley's got 100%, by the way, so just don't want to be competitive, but 100% is good. Then women and girls told us that they weren't using parks and green spaces, so Tracy worked with Leeds University, commissioned a piece of work around parks and green spaces. That led to a huge document being developed around design guidance and giving Green Park local authorities guidance around how to improve their green spaces. Tracy used some of her mayoral money again to invest in 10 parks in West Yorkshire to put some of those ideas into practice. But we now know that internationally people have used that guidance and are improving their parks to increase access by women and girls in those parks. And Green Flag have incorporated that guidance into their Green Flag accreditation, and congratulations for the 7 parks that have passed that standard here in Leeds. We've also invested again in IDVA's independent sexual violence advocates, independent domestic abuse advocates, but also Tracy set up an independent stalking advocacy service. Because one of the first things we did was to meet a group of women who were survivors of stalking, and they said to us, West Yorkshire Police are not as good as they could and should be around stalking. As a result of that, West Yorkshire Police did an audit into their own practice, set up their own stalking coordination unit, and then Tracy commissioned a stalking advocacy service to support victims of stalking through the criminal justice system and into a support pathway. So I'm giving you a few highlights. There's so much more I could tell you about. We're currently working with the VOG sector and some of the women that they're working with. So it's a survivor panel to have a regular input into survivors and what they want from policing, what they want from us. They want access to MPs, they want access to changing legislation. We had a round table earlier this year, April. We invited all the MPs so they could listen to the VOG sector's ideas about achieving the 50% reduction in VOG offences, which we've sent to all 22 MPs here in Leeds so that they can use that to influence government. We're having a follow-up event in September to talk about Casey and her recommendations and how we should be influencing the terms of reference to those recommendations so that the voices of our survivors are implemented. So lots and lots of work that is ongoing. I could talk about the Women's Safety Unit, the first and only one in the country, a partnership between West Yorkshire Police, the VRP, the Violence Reduction Partnership, which is funded by the Mayor, and our team here at WICA, working to focus on investigations and risk assessments in West Yorkshire Police. As a result of that work, huge amount of activity in West Yorkshire Police to improve their performance and their response. So, for example, they've now got a programme called Rapid, which means if a domestic abuse call comes in, they will present within an hour of that call. This is all part of the work that we're doing together with West Yorkshire Police to improve our responses to VOG in the county. Jude, I understand you want to come in.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. And just in addition, I just wanted to bring reference to the Safer Leeds report that talks specifically about VOG and our sort of delivery within Leeds itself, just really reinforcing what the Deputy Mayor's talked about from a wider perspective. We very much mirror that strategic approach. We've got a strategy, a delivery plan that sits alongside that with an activity map of all the things that Alison's mentioned. You know, some real standout things. We talked about PSPOs recently, the utilisation of that tool around something that's called Jog On, which is a pilot that was launched in Bradford around sort of women and girls exercising in public spaces, and how we utilising that sort of enforcement tool, and also working alongside just to help sort of that educational piece around active bystander. And the Jog On principle is about plainclothes police officers running with women and girls in running groups, and then calling out those types of behaviours, but making sure that everybody's educated around that and there's a reporting structure. We've got some really good examples within the report around how we've redesigned spaces, at Banstead Park in particular. That came through some UKSPF funding, very much driven by women and girls feedback and those listening circles that we've adopted within Leeds around trying to get those views. So I'll just bring reference to some of those extra bits that we've done from a Leeds perspective to really reinforce the work we've done around West Yorkshire.
And I should add that the UKSPF
Great. And it's on that subject matter that I'd like to follow on from the previous discussion. So we mentioned the area around pavement parking and speeding, and how that had a specific effect on an equality characteristic. So you've just mentioned all the great work which has been done on a specific equality characteristic which people felt was a real important thing to tackle, and it was a priority. So moving on from that good practice which has been achieved in one area, are you thinking about doing something similar for another equality characteristic, such as potentially the disabled, and looking at these areas where the neighbourhood is identifying this as a priority, but previously funding hasn't enabled it to happen? In the report, it talks about having safer streets funding, which we've been successful in achieving year on year, and also there's a community safety fund which has been allocated to the 5 different authorities. Also, of course, the Mayor herself has gain share funding, which can be applied anywhere. And you've just talked about the innovative use of BSIP funding to deliver specific community safety investment in women and girls. Could that ingenuity be offered to the disabled community, for instance, as the next area to have a focus on in terms of delivering equity in policing resource?
And holding West Yorkshire Police to account for the way that they interact. So, for example, could talk a lot about the LGBT plus community, it being Pride on Sunday, but in terms of people with disabilities, the Mayor has several groups that she has developed so that she can speak to groups of disabled people about the services that she's responsible for. So buses, case in point, we see a very, very large group of bus users who have mobility, disability or other conditions that the Mayor meets with regularly and that her staff meet with regularly, and they inform the practice. So, for example, there's is it orange? There's an orange badge scheme, so that if you wear that on the bus driver has been trained, they know that means that you have got maybe a hidden condition or not a hidden condition, but that means that the bus driver will understand if it takes you a long time to get to your seat or some other difficulty that you might be experiencing. So in terms of policing, clearly we fund a lot of organisations. Now, because I didn't know you were going to ask this question, We gave you a lot of examples of the charities that when the groups that we've been funding through the Mayor Safe Communities Fund. Those are groups that bid for the money and tell us how they're going to deliver the Mayor's police and crime plan priorities. EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion, is one of the underpinning themes of the plan. So any group who are working with a specific or multiple protected characteristics would be eligible to bid for that money. And I know that we've actually funded many different groups working across the multiple disability strands, but I can't tell you about them now because I haven't got them in front of me, but we can definitely send you a list of all the different work that we've been doing. And I know that for a fact because about 6 months ago I had a big interview with a charity representing disabled people, and I gave them a very full answer because I was prepared. So when I get the data I shall send it to you and be very happy to do so.
Thank you. However, one of the things that you can't bid for as a voluntary organisation is to get extra policing time to enforce obstruction laws. So is that something that might be considered?
So as you know, parking on pavements is a local authority responsibility in the main. Yes, it is, in the main. There are some circumstances where the police can and will act. So if it's a very dangerous bend, for example, but it is a fact that parking on the pavement is a local authority responsibility, and that's why the police it is, and that's why the police it is. Yeah, it's being deregulated. I've had this conversation with the Chief Constable on many occasions, and he will tell you, we've had it at the Police and Crime Panel, and he will tell you, as I am telling you, that parking on the pavement is a local authority responsibility. It was deregulated in 2010, 2012, I can't remember the exact date. The money that West Yorkshire Police had to scrutinise that area of work was given to local authorities, and in some cases the police can intervene, but it's where there's danger to the public. But where there's it's blocking the pavement, then it is a local authority concern.
I think we're going to have to disagree on that.
That's okay.
Alison,
I'm sure it won't be the first, and
because it
won't
only
be the
becomes
last.
a local authority concern if that local authority has the powers to enforce that as an offence, and local authorities do not have that unless they intentionally take those powers on board.
Which they did.
However,
in 2010.
however, there is an offence of blocking the highway, obstruction, which doesn't have to be dangerous. It can just be that it's blocking the highway, and that can be enforced by the police.
Yeah, I said that in some limited circumstances the police can act, yeah. But the majority of blocked pavements are the local authorities.
Perhaps this looks like we should have a deeper dive on this one, Scrutiny, perhaps to clarify the situation in West Yorkshire so that we can ensure that everybody is fulfilling the role that they should be having if there's some confusion to it. So I think we'll have that as a recommendation, shall we? Councillor Haigh.
Well, perhaps, Chair, we should refer it to the Wyker Scrutiny Board to have a look at if it's a whole West Yorkshire issue. But I must say it's absolutely clear from speaking to policing teams, neighbourhood policing teams, they say they do have the powers and that the local authority can only enforce lines and signs, as my colleagues likes to say. They don't. So our parking attendants don't have powers to enforce obstruction and pavement parking. And I think that is a fact. It's only in London that authorities have that power.
Yes, that's correct. Councillor Anderson, can I... Yeah, Councillor Anderson, I think we've got a suggestion here where I know that Wyker are looking for potential joint projects with Council Scrutiny to look at areas of common interest. Maybe this is something you could incorporate within your work programme.
I would love to, but because police-related things are looked after by the Police and Crime Panel, not by the Wyker Scrutiny Board, it would need to go to the Police and Crime Panel. You could probably do it, but it would need to go to, if you're asking a police officer, I have no powers to ask a police officer, I have no powers to ask Mayor Lowe.
I'm very happy to ask the Chief Constable his views and put it into writing and send it to you. I've not got an issue. Because what he said to me is what I've said to you.
Yes, we'll do both. Okay, next question, Councillor Dowson again.
No, Chair, we've missed the point. The point was about the snowball effect of starting somewhere and how you've built initiative after initiative to actually make lives of women and girls better. So we got past that, but thank you.
Any further questions for the Deputy Mayor? Councillor Haig.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd like to go back to the money the Mayor allocates through. It's slightly confusing to have a community safety fund and a safer communities fund, I think. But the community safety fund, because I think we all know that to build safer communities, you need resilient communities. And there are some examples given of some of the projects that have been supported in the report. So the Hamara Healthy Living Centre, Street Safe Leeds in Gipton and Hare Hills, and the Bright Spots Theatre Arts Company. And is there any sort of particular sort of area of development that you see with the Mayor of taking that funding in particular kinds of projects you'd like to support? Or, are you just sort of open to what responding to what communities are coming forward and saying?
So the Mayor Safer Communities Fund is proceeds of Crime Act monies that the police bring in through their economic crime unit. It gets given to various bodies according to law, and then we get what's left, which is brilliant, with the agreement of West Yorkshire Police. We then send out a specification to and other community groups, charities, public bodies, so local authorities can bid for that money, as can the police, as can fire, as can any other public body, ambulance for example, as long as they're working to deliver the police and crime plan. So the criteria is the delivery of the plan, or it might be delivery of a clear hold build piece of work in, say, for example, Hare Hills. If the application comes through, it then goes to what I call a people panel. So Tracy and I are not involved in any decision making. The Community Safety Partnership is represented, and then there are members of the public who have been trained who then decide, not just in Leeds, from across all West Yorkshire, and they spend a very long time for free going through all those applications and deciding which are the top. So they'll decide how much money we've got. So currently it's £350,000, but the last pot was £1 million. And they will then decide who passes the threshold for funding, and the more innovative it is, the better they like it. They love partnership bids, but it's not a matter for Tracy and I, the detail. It's about, will it deliver the police and crime plan in the judgment of the panel? And if they think it will, and it's innovative and it's exciting, and if it's new, they like it. If it's new, they try to make sure that it's equal across West Yorkshire. So we get, obviously by head of population, so we get a list of how many for West Yorkshire, how many for Leeds, Bradford, Kirklees, etc., because then we sign off the whole. But it is a decision of this panel, so it's a people-powered exercise.
Thank you. Can you clarify whether, as you've said, it's the proceeds of crime fund and it's allocated to other areas and then you get the remainder? Are there any legislative restrictions on how that can be distributed?
Yes. So, for example, you can't spend it on, building a building. It can't be contributing to capital, for example. You can buy things. So, for example, a charity in Bradford called Lotus, working with women who sex work. We bought mobile phones. Tesco's gave us all the top-up cards for free. Well, they gave the charity all the top-up cards for free. Sanitary products, some basic stuff that the women told us they wanted, and you were able to buy that. But if you wanted to contribute towards a bus, a minibus, or the building of a centre, that wouldn't be allowed.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Councillor Anderson.
Everybody's right and everybody's wrong in terms of the pavement parking. Alison is correct, right, that pavement parking in itself is not an offence. However, if it's an obstruction of the pavement, it then becomes a police interpretation as to whether or not...
It's a police interpretation, yeah,
the,
and that's why they say to me, if it's a hazard, they will act.
I'm being helpful.
Oh yeah, no, I know. Thank you. I'm just saying exactly what you've just
because,
said.
And it says as well that about councils can only enforce it if they've got yellow lines. That's So I mean, to be honest, in my area, that's where the problem comes in. What the local disability groups consider an obstruction offence, an individual police officer. You could get 3 police officers coming out and getting 3 different views. Exactly. If the truth be told, that's not a criticism. That's just because there is no hard and fast thing.
Councillor Anderson, I think it's one of those things that we've already got an action where we've got a recommendation to look into this better, because we've looked into this in the past, and there are different specifications as to what length of highway is an obstructed highway. But that's something we can get clarification on in an outside of this particular meeting, because obviously Alison has to leave at 22. Are there any further questions from the board? One of the things I'd like to ask is, there are, of course, restrictions in terms of what can be directed to the police in terms of the oversight that the mayoral office offers. One of the areas which would be useful to understand, though, which was referred to earlier, was in recent history there has been a preponderance of police community support officers which enabled visible policing in communities by the police service when full-blown officers were obviously drawn into more serious crime elsewhere oftentimes. However, over recent years, PCSO numbers have fallen, and the mayor's policing plan reduces them further. However, there is an expansion or an expectation that there is in terms of special constables. Does the mayor or the deputy mayor have any influence in terms of what the policing family looks like in terms of numbers of police officers, numbers of police community support officers, or are you basically presented it by the service itself and have no influence?
So first of all, I don't believe the mayor's policing plan has an expectation anywhere has a plan that we will reduce policing, that Tracy and I will reduce policing. However, West Yorkshire Police have made it clear, and I have said on several occasions, starting from the last precept increase last February, we made it really clear that people were not getting anything additional for that precept increase. So the years before, we were paying for a fixed number of PCSOs. West Yorkshire Police, as everyone knows, have been cut since 2010, overall something like 10-11%. Which equates to about £160 million. And yes, there's been growth, but there's also been cuts, so that's why net it's about 160 million less than we should have had. So they have done a medium-term financial forecast, which has at its heart a growth in police officer numbers, but a reduction in police staff numbers, and PCSOs are police staff. West Yorkshire Police have done an audit of all the forces nationally, and we have more PCSOs than any other local authority in England, but not Wales, because Wales funds, the Government of Wales funds PCSOs from the centre. And of course, as many people in the room will know, Leeds City Council used to fund 50% of all PCSOs. And at the point that they decided not to do that because of your own funding problems, the entirety of that burden fell on West Yorkshire Police, which they were able to maintain for a period, supported by the precept. But unfortunately, the rising costs, the failure to invest in not West Yorkshire Police, but nationally, the failure to invest in technology, in capital. So nearly all our buildings are PFI, for example, which are always more expensive than non-PFI. The cost of technology, so we have spent in West Yorkshire hundreds of millions of pounds towards the national new computer system, ESCP, I think it's called, which was then abandoned by the last government after we had spent hundreds of millions of pounds over a period of 10 years when we didn't need it because we've got our own system that works better than the system that we were being told we had to fund centrally. And so as a result of all that, all forces are facing over the next 3 years a £500 million black hole. There used to be a capital grant that the government gave, and then the last government cut that capital grant. So that's why we're having to build everything using PFI, of course. And so we're in a situation where in order to balance the books, police staff numbers are reducing. And so we will lose in the region of about 200 to 220 PCSOs over the next 3 years. That's been put in the public domain in February of this year when we did the precept. Those numbers were in the public domain. I have spoken on REMA and various other places about those numbers. We try to influence, but the stark reality is if we don't cut PCSOs or other staff members, where will those resources come from? And what is happening, and which this is something that I've told Yvette Cooper, I told the previous Home Secretary and Policing Minister, is that there are now these things called grey roles. So more and more police staff roles are being covered by police officers. That's what grey roles refers to. So you've got qualified police officers who should be on the street, being visible, one by one, being brought into the contact centre, acting as detention officers, acting in all sorts of roles that it's a bit of a waste. It's not good value for the public. The Home Office came to West Yorkshire last October and spent 2 days going through our books because I had told them we're going to lose 200 odd PCSOs, and obviously they didn't want us to, so they came to see whether or not our maths was right, and they conceded that our maths were right, and that in order to have a balanced budget, that was the price that the public in West Yorkshire had to pay. But what we have got is in January, as part of the neighbourhood policing grant and guarantee, we're now in the process of recruiting 100 new police officers, and obviously they have more powers than PCSOs. They work the 3-shift pattern, which PCSOs don't. They're 9 to 5. Sometimes they'll work over, well, 9 to 7, I think they'll work, but they don't work all night as police officers do. And 45 specials. The specials have the same powers as police officers. So we are replacing some of the lost staff and PCSOs with officers, but it is an existential threat, I think, to policing that the current funding situation, not just here in West Yorkshire, but nationally, has not been addressed through the CSR. And that means that we are robbing Peter to pay Paul, and eventually the system will creak. I hope it won't collapse. I think here in West Yorkshire we've got some really great minds pulling the resources that they've got together. There's a huge income generation plan, and I should also say that nationally the government has got plans to reform the whole of policing using a national centre of police programme that we're going to get a white paper, we think, in October, which will outline how, by creating this national centre of policing, things like procurement, things like digital, things like national air service, which currently West Yorkshire leads on, serious organised criminality, counter-terrorism, are all going to come under the aegis of one chief constable and in a 44th force or something in that ilk, because it's all going to cost money and we need to know how much money we've got to do it. And that is hope that that will bring money from forces that currently are spending it individually, and that there will be resources freed up to then give back into policing to prevent this existential threat that, if nothing changes, will definitely happen. Is that 20 to... It is. Sorry, you can't ask me any questions.
No, we appreciate that candid overview, actually, before you've left. Councillor Hay, did you want to say thank you? Or?
I do want to say thank you for that, but also a bit of a challenge, I think, in terms of, we really do focus on police and PCSOs in terms of actual numbers, and really important that we do have the right number of those. But you alluded to really what's been the cuts to, I think, the civilian police staff, which is making those gaps that you're having to move uniformed personnel into. So in terms of, and you said this stuff, in terms of value, is that something that we should be looking at in terms of, can we actually get civilians into the roles at lower cost and doing the right things in terms of they can't be out on the streets, as opposed
I
to
just need to explain, because I've got to go soon.
Yeah.
The Chief Constable has an absolute right to deploy his or her resources in any way they see fit. There's an operational strategic split, so Tracy and I can influence, but we can't tell or order. The problem for every Chief Constable is the uplift. So the last government uplifted policing by 20,000. And what they did is they said, tell us your baseline, how many officers have you got now? And then every officer that they paid for, in order to get the grant to continue the maintenance of those additional 20,000, you have to maintain the entirety of that police number, otherwise you'll lose the whole grant. So that means police chief constables cannot use their best resources in the way that they want to. So for them, the uplift has been both a blessing and a curse, because they've got more police officers, but that means they have to replace staff with officers and create those grey roles, because that work still has to be done, but they cannot get rid of a police officer. One police officer, you lose £85,000. And that's what the new uplift that's coming from government, the £8.5 million we're going to enjoy here in West Yorkshire, has exactly the same requirements. If we lose any of those 100, you lose £85,000 per officer. And with the best will in the world, it doesn't matter if you can bring in a member of staff at 35 or 40 grand, then you lose £125,000 because you're paying for the police staff and you're losing the police officer. That's the problem. It's systemic and it comes from the Home Office, and everyone's stuck because nobody wants to lose police officers. That's what the public wants.
Can I just ask quickly, Alison?
I'm afraid we won't be able to ask any more questions of Alison,
I
because she has to go meet the minister.
It's just that I've heard that some PCSOs have actually gone to train to be police officers.
Of course, because we've got 100, we've got vacancies, so they're moving, and that's a good thing. We're not losing that resource.
Yeah, we're just going to say that's positive.
Councillor Renshaw. Yes, on your first meeting as well, your card's marked. We want to thank Alison very much for coming to talk to us today and giving us that really useful oversight. I hope you have great luck with the Minister that you're meeting consequent to this meeting, and that you get a good deal for us here in West Yorkshire. Are there any other questions for Rob? No?
Sorry. No.
In that case, I will say that we do have some recommendations, don't we, at the end of this?
You've got, yes.
Which are basically to take up the scrutiny engagement to understand what model we could have whereby we're working with WICA to take forward the issue around pavement parking / obstruction enforcement. Were there any other recommendations? I didn't think so either. Thank you very much for your attendance today, Board. We had a very productive meeting, and I hope to see you again on September the 11th.